what if the exact things that make you a perfect employee and, an ideal friend are the exact same mechanisms causing a complete and catastrophic failure in your nervous system?
Right. Yeah, it's a scary thought.
It really is. I mean, imagine this for a second. You wake up before your alarm even goes off. You hit the gym. You power through this incredibly stressful commute. You walk into the office, and you are just the ultimate professional.
Firing on all cylinders.
Exactly. You're hitting every single metric, and then your phone buzzes. It's a friend asking for a massive favor, something you absolutely do not have the time or, honestly, the emotional bandwidth for today.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. But you reply instantly. You type, "Of course, happy to help," because you are the perfect friend who never says no.
You literally can't say no.
You can't. And then you get home, you're the ideal partner, you're listening attentively, making dinner, and through it all, you're just holding this entire operation together with this bright, forced smile. It's so exhausting. You get the good grades, the stellar performance reviews, people are constantly telling you how amazing and reliable you are, but internally, you feel absolutely zero joy. Nothing.
Wow, yeah. Just empty.
Just emptied. It just feels like you are endlessly checking boxes on a list that, never ever gets shorter.
It's an exhausting way to exist. I mean, you're describing a state where external achievement completely masks an internal void.
Yeah.
The person you're describing isn't actually living. They're executing a highly optimized program. And human hardware is fundamentally not designed to run that kind of program indefinitely without breaking down.
Which brings us to the core mystery of today's exploration. Why does doing everything right feel so incredibly exhausting?
Exactly.
Why, when you are surrounded by people who seemingly like you, who praise your work, do you feel entirely, fundamentally alone?
It's a huge paradox.
It is. So today we are looking at a fascinating, completely anonymous manuscript we recently received. It's this highly personal, really raw journal of psychological development.
It really pulls no punches.
Not at all. And the mission of this exploration is to trace one person's path from crippling robotic perfectionism to this messy, beautiful state of radical self-acceptance.
Which is quite a journey.
Totally. We are going to look at how trying to be flawless almost destroyed their life, and how giving up on perfect was literally the only thing that saved them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the breakdown, we have to start at the root of the confusion.
Right. The internal pressure cooker.
Yes, the pressure cooker of perfectionism.
Yeah, the author of this manuscript paints a very vivid picture of living with what psychologists call all-or-nothing thinking.
Right.
It's this cognitive distortion where the brain, it only processes the world in absolute binary.
There's no middle ground at all.
None. It is white or black. It is 100 or 0. I mean, if you score 95 on a test, your brain doesn't register an A.
It registers a failure.
Exactly. It registers a total failure because it wasn't a 100. There is absolutely no concept of good enough.
That sounds miserable. Oh, it is. If you make a single tiny mistake at a dinner party, the entire evening is cataloged as a disaster in your mind.
I'm trying to wrap my head around living like that constantly. Sounds like you were just constantly on trial.
You are, with yourself as the judge.
The author uses a really striking analogy early on in these notes. They describe navigating their daily life like a horse with blinders.
Oh, I loved that part.
Yeah. You know those leather flaps they attach to the bridles of carriage horses so the animal can only see straight ahead?
Right, so they don't get spooked.
Exactly. The author says they move through their entire young adult life with this severe, self-imposed tunnel vision. They were terrified of distracting others.
Terrified of disappointing their loved one.
Yes. Terrified of making a single wrong move that might inconvenience someone else. So they became this tiny, rigid perfectionist just to avoid adding any problems to the adult world.
What's fascinating here is how early this programming actually starts for so many of us.
Really? Like in childhood?
Oh, absolutely. And how rational it seems to a child's brain. I mean, if we look closely at developmental psychology, kids are incredibly perceptive little sponges.
They pick up on everything.
Everything. They observe the adult world around them. They absorb the stress, the, hushed arguments about bills, the sheer exhaustion their parents bring home from work.
Yeah, you can definitely feel that tension in the house as a kid.
Right. And many children, particularly those who are naturally more sensitive to their environments, they unconsciously decide that their best survival mechanism is to just be invisible.
Invisible and perfect.
Yes, that becomes their way of securing love, safety, and stability. They internalize this narrative of the adults are overwhelmed, I will not be another problem for them to solve.
Wow.
I will be the solution by being completely flawless and requiring zero maintenance.
Wait, so being a good kid, like the one who always does their homework without being asked, the one who never throws a tantrum, that can actually be a stress response.
It isn't always rooted in severe trauma, but it is very often an emotional adaptation.
That makes so much sense.
The child learns that praise and safety are conditional upon their output.
Right. I am only loved if I perform well.
Exactly. And the danger happens when they carry that childhood adaptation straight into adulthood. It mutates. That childhood desire to be good solidifies into this monstrous inner critic.
Yeah, because suddenly you're an adult and the rules are different, but your brain is still playing the old game.
Exactly. When your self-worth is entirely fused to your flawless execution of tasks, achievements stop being victories.
They just become obligations. And the manuscript talks about that exact transition. The author describes a moment where they achieved something massive, like getting top grades after months of grueling sleep-deprived study.
Right?
And when the results came in, there was no celebration.
None at all.
No dopamine hit, no joy. It just felt like paying a bill.
Because that is exactly how their brain was processing it. I mean, if you view a perfect score not as a triumph, but as the absolute bare minimum required to maintain your worth as a human being, you strip all the potential joy out of the experience.
You're just breaking even.
Exactly. It creates a baseline of chronic, buzzing anxiety. Success brings zero happiness. It only brings a fleeting, temporary sense of relief that you survived another round of evaluation.
A deep sigh of relief.
And then almost immediately, the panic sets in about the next goal, the next test, the next expectation you have to meet.
It's like you're running on a treadmill that keeps increasing in speed. And the only reward for sprinting until your lungs burn is that you don't get thrown off the back of the machine.
It's bleak.
It's incredibly bleak. But there is a profound realization the author has once they finally reach a breaking point and enter therapy. The therapist looks at them and delivers a very hard truth.
A necessary one, though.
Very necessary. The therapist says, you cannot be a 10 out of 10 in everything.
Right. The math just doesn't work.
The math doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you try to be a 10 at your job, a 10 in your romantic relationship, a 10 in fitness, a 10 as a supportive friend, and a 10 in your hobbies, you will inevitably crash the entire system to a 0.
Because the therapist is introducing the concept of finite biological resources,
Right.
human energy, cognitive bandwidth, and emotional capacity, they are not limitless. The advice here is about strategic prioritization.
So you had to choose.
You have to consciously sit down and choose the specific areas of your life where you are willing to spend the energy to be an 8 or a 9.
And what about the other areas?
Well, that's the much harder part. You have to radically accept being a 5 or a 6 in those other areas.
I can only imagine how a severe perfectionist reacts to the instruction to be a 5. That probably sounded like a literal death sentence to the author at first.
Oh, I'm sure it triggered massive panic.
I want you, the listener, to try a thought experiment right now. Think about your absolute best friend.
Okay.
Imagine they are completely exhausted. They're juggling a demanding job, family issues, and trying to stay healthy. Would you ever stand over them and demand they operate at a 10 out of 10?
No, of course not.
Would you call them a complete failure because they left dishes in the sink while preparing for a major presentation?
Obviously not. You would offer them grace. You would encourage them to rest, to let the dishes sit, to just order takeout instead of cooking a perfect meal.
So the obvious question is, why are we so relentless with ourselves? Why do we demand a level of robotic perfection from ourselves that we would immediately recognize as abusive if someone else demanded it of our friends?
It comes back to that fused identity we talked about.
Right.
When you are a perfectionist, your self-worth is rented, not inherent.
Oh, wow. Rented, not inherent. That hits hard.
It's true. And the rent is due every single morning in the form of flawless execution. If you give a friend gross, it's because you believe their worth is inherent. You love them simply for existing.
But the perfectionist does not believe that about themselves.
Exactly. However, the biological reality of this situation is totally unforgiving. You can only suppress your basic human needs, your need for rest, your natural emotional fluctuations, your physical limits, for so long.
Because the body keeps the score.
It does. This kind of perfectionism is not a sustainable life strategy. It is a fuse slowly burning toward a powder keg.
And that powder keg eventually explodes. Which brings us to a really intense, very difficult part of the manuscript. The moment when the body simply takes over and says, no more.
You cannot outwork your own biology indefinitely.
You really can't. The author details a terrifying descent into severe anxiety. And we're not talking about feeling a little stressed about a deadline here.
No, it was a total physical and mental collapse.
Right. It started as physical panic attacks. Completely normal environments suddenly transformed into threat zones. They recount having severe panic attacks in the driver's seat of their car.
Yeah, just doing everyday tasks.
Wandering through regular shopping malls, just sitting quietly in university lecture halls.
Because the human nervous system has a hard limit. We have an area in the brain called the amygdala, which acts as our internal alarm system.
Right. The fight or flight center.
Exactly. It is designed to detect threats. When you continuously operate in a state of hypervigilance, like constantly scanning your environment for potential failures, worrying about people you might disappoint, anticipating criticism, your amygdala is constantly firing.
It never gets a break.
Never. And just like a muscle that you work out every single day, the amygdala can become hypertrophied.
Wait, you're saying the physical structure of the brain actually changes? The fear center gets physically bigger.
Yes. It becomes overly sensitive and physically more reactive.
That is wild.
When the amygdala is hypertrophied, it gets stuck in the on position. It no longer requires a genuine life-threatening danger, like a predator, to trigger a full-blown physiological panic response.
So anything can set it off.
Anything. A slightly ambiguous email from a boss, or just standing in a crowded room, can trigger the exact same cascade of adrenaline and cortisol as being chased by a bear.
That perfectly explains what the author started experiencing. But then, the manuscript notes that the physical panic morphed into something even darker and much harder to talk about.
The intrusive thoughts.
Yes. Relentless intrusive thoughts. The author is incredibly brave here, honestly, providing very specific, vulnerable examples of what these internal what-if scenarios sounded like.
It's very jarring to read.
Their brains started haunting them with questions like, what if I suddenly scream obscenities in the middle of this quiet class?
Right.
What if the world isn't actually real and we are all trapped in a simulation? What if I am secretly a terrible, dangerous person and I just don't know it yet?
We need to slow down here and explain what intrusive thoughts actually are, because the mechanism behind them is so crucial for understanding this level of anxiety.
Please do, because it sounds terrifying.
It is terrifying. People often mistakenly believe that an intrusive thought is a repressed desire.
Right, like deep down you actually want to do it.
Exactly. They think, if my brain just visualized me screaming in class, some deep, dark part of me must actually want to do it. That interpretation is completely false.
Okay, that's a huge relief.
Clinically, intrusive thoughts are what we call ego dystonic.
Meaning what, exactly? Break down ego dystonic for us.
It means the thought is entirely incongruent with the person's actual values, desires, and self-image. It is the exact opposite of what they want.
Oh, I see.
Think about it. The anxious mind is scanning for threats, right? When it can't find a physical threat in the room, it turns inward.
It creates one.
Yes, it latches onto a person's deepest fears and core values, and it generates a terrifying scenario attacking what they value the most.
That is incredibly twisted. The brain essentially uses your own moral compass as a weapon against you.
That's a very good way to put it. If you highly value being polite, respectful, and socially appropriate, your anxiety will generate an intrusive thought about screaming and obscenity.
Because that's the worst possible thing you could imagine doing.
Precisely. If your core value is being a moral, loving person, the anxiety will ask, what if I am secretly evil? The thoughts cause such immense panic specifically because they go against everything the person stands for.
That clarification changes the entire framing of the author's suffering. They write extensively about how isolated they felt during this period. They genuinely thought they were losing their grip on reality.
It's a very lonely place to be.
They were terrified to confess these thoughts to a doctor or a friend because they assumed they would be locked up in a psychiatric ward.
Which is such a common fear with ego dystonic thoughts.
And what compounded the suffering was the complete loss of their identity. Up until this point, the author was known as the jingle bell of their friend group.
The jingle bell, I love that term.
Right. They were the cheerful one, the upbeat problem solver, the one who always made everyone laugh and kept the mood light.
When your foundational identity is built entirely on being the happy, easygoing one, experiencing severe depression or anxiety doesn't just feel like an illness.
It feels like you're failing at being yourself.
Exactly. It feels like a failure of identity. You feel like a total fraud.
So they tried to fake it. They doubled down on the performance. They write about trying to force that smile, putting the jingle bell mask back on, and attempting to convince everyone around them that everything was perfectly fine.
Which is the worst thing you can do for an exhausted nervous system.
Yeah, forcing that fake happiness actually accelerated the sickness. It made the panic exponentially worse.
Because it requires an astronomical amount of cognitive energy to maintain a facade that radically contradicts your internal physiological reality.
You're at war with your own body.
The author was essentially fighting a brutal war on two fronts, battling the terrifying anxiety internally and fighting to maintain the flawless illusion externally.
That sounds unsustainable.
It is. That dual effort drains whatever minimal reserves the nervous system has left. There is a vital psychological principle presented in the text. It originates from early 20th century psychoanalytic theory, though the author simply uses it as a guiding mantra.
Okay, what is it?
The principle states, what you deny subdues you. What you accept transforms you.
What you deny subdues you. What you accept transforms you. It's a powerful idea, but I have to push back on how difficult that is in practice.
It is incredibly difficult.
When your own mind becomes your worst rival, when you feel like you are trapped in a small room with a monster and the room is your own skull, how do you actually practice acceptance?
It takes a fundamental shift in behavior.
Right, because if a wave of panic is rushing at you,
Yeah.
telling you that you're a terrible person or that you're going to lose control, my instinct, and I think most people's instinct, is to brace for impact, to fight it. Are you saying the solution is to just let it drown you?
It feels like drowning, which is why the instinct is to fight, but fighting is the trap.
Okay.
The author outlines a necessary shift in perspective using the exact metaphor of an ocean wave. Think about standing in the surf. If you see a massive wave coming and you stand completely rigid, bracing your muscles against it, what happens?
The wave crashes into you, it breaks your stance, and it pulls you under.
Exactly. You are trying to physically fight the ocean, and the ocean will win every single time.
So if bracing gets you crushed, what is the alternative?
You stop bracing.
Just give up.
Not give up, surrender to the physics of it. If you dive into the wave, or if you simply let your body go loose and allow the water to wash over you without resisting, it is still an intense experience.
Right, you still get tossed around a bit.
You still get wet, you still feel the immense power of the water, but you don't break, and the wave eventually recedes.
Wow.
In psychological terms, the key to acceptance is not arguing with the content of the anxiety. When an intrusive thought flares up and says, "What if I'm a terrible person?" the immediate instinct is to jump into the ring and argue with it.
Yeah, you start defending yourself to your own brain.
Start listing your good deeds. You say, "No, I'm not. I gave to charity yesterday. I love my family. I'm a good person."
But wait, why is arguing a bad thing? Isn't that just reminding yourself of the truth?
Logically, yes. But neurologically, by arguing with the thought, you are signaling to your amygdala that the thought is a valid, legitimate threat that requires defense.
Oh, you're validating the alarm.
Exactly. The acceptance phase involves observing the thought without assigning meaning to it. You look at it and say, that is a very scary image produced by an overtired, sensitized nervous system.
It is a symptom of my high anxiety, not a reflection of my character.
Yes. And then you do not engage further. You let the wave wash over you.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because this internal suffering, this exhausting daily battle with the waves, does not happen in a vacuum.
No, it spills over into everything.
It really does. The perfectionism and the anxiety completely distort how this person relates to the outside world. The manuscript transitions into a close look at the illusion of connection and what happens to our friendships when we are permanently wearing that people-pleasing mask.
The author reflects on a deeply painful paradox regarding their social life. They look back and note that the specific period in their life when they had the highest number of friends, when their phone was constantly buzzing with invitations, and their social calendar was packed every night.
The era of peak popularity.
Yes, that era was the exact same time they felt the most profoundly, cripplingly isolated.
Which seems counterintuitive until you understand the mask.
Yeah.
If you are the jingle bell, if you are the person who never says no, never complains, and always organizes the fun, of course people want you around. You are providing a service.
Right, an entertainment service.
But those friends didn't actually know the author. They only knew a fake, highly curated, people-pleasing avatar.
The author was experiencing the phenomenon of being entirely lonely in a crowded room. because genuine human connection requires vulnerability.
You have to let people see the mess.
If you do not allow yourself to be fully seen, which includes your flaws, your anxiety, your bad moods, and your limitations, you cannot be truly loved. You can only be applauded for your performance.
And applause is not connection.
It really isn't.
And that performance was heavily fueled by intense FOMO, the fear of missing out. The manuscript paints this vivid picture of modern digital anxiety. The author describes checking social media obsessively, absolutely terrified of being left out of a group photo or missing an inside joke.
The anxiety of irrelevance.
Exactly. This overwhelming fear of becoming irrelevant led them to agree to plans they actively hated. They were spending their severely limited energy in loud, crowded places they didn't want to be, interacting with people who didn't really know them, all just to avoid the anxiety of being forgotten.
It becomes a tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy. They gave 100% of themselves to everyone else, becoming completely depleted in the process.
And they operated under this unspoken, deeply flawed assumption. They assumed that because they were so fiercely loyal, giving, and self-sacrificing, their friends would naturally and instantly reciprocate that level of dedication.
Which is a recipe for disaster.
Because people don't. The author had to face this incredibly painful realization. Just because you would bend over backward and set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm doesn't mean they will do the same for you.
Nor should they have to.
Right. And that lack of reciprocation led to a buildup of constant disappointment and quiet resentment. They felt like a victim of their own friendships, constantly let down by people who never asked them to be a martyr in the first place.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally comes down to ego and the spotlight effect.
The spotlight effect.
Yes. When we are deeply insecure and anxious, our worldview becomes incredibly egocentric. We assume everyone is scrutinizing our every move.
We think we're on stage.
We think everyone is keeping a mental scorecard of our attendance at parties, judging our outfits, and evaluating our worth. The author finally discovers a liberating, albeit slightly bruising, psychological truth. Humans are generally completely consumed by their own lives.
We are all the main characters in our own movies, and everyone else is just a background extra.
Precisely. If someone judges you for saying no to a party, or if you wear something they think is weird, that judgment occupies their mind for maybe 2 minutes.
And then they're over it.
And then they go right back to worrying about their own insecurities, their own relationships, their own financial problems. You are simply not the center of their universe.
Which sounds a little harsh at first, but it is actually the most freeing concept in the world. If no one is really obsessing over your every move, you can finally take the mask off.
You can just breathe.
And the cure for the author's intense loneliness wasn't to go out and aggressively network to make better, more loyal friends. The cure they discovered was learning to have dates with themselves.
Solitude had to become the antidote to their loneliness. They had to learn the difference between being alone and being lonely.
The manuscript outlines how they started doing things entirely alone. They started singing, writing, going for walks, making videos in their bedroom with zero audience.
Reconnecting with themselves.
Yeah. They had to learn how to actually enjoy their own company before they could invite anyone else into it genuinely.
Yeah.
It really makes you pause and evaluate modern societal pressures.
Oh, definitely.
We are immersed in a culture that explicitly tells you that you need a massive, highly visible social circle to be a valuable person. Your worth as a human is often measured in followers, likes, and the sheer volume of group chats you are in.
But the biological reality tells a vastly different story about human capacity.
What do you mean?
Well, evolutionary biology imposes strict limitations on our social bandwidth. Anthropological concepts, like Dunbar's number, suggest we only have the cognitive capacity to maintain a handful of true, deep, reciprocal connections.
Like how many?
Perhaps around 5 to 15 people. Trying to maintain 50 deep friendships is neurologically impossible.
So when you try, you don't end up with 50 close friends. You end up with 50 superficial acquaintances.
Exactly. The author realized that finding 1 or 2 friends who allow you to take off the heavy armor is worth infinitely more than 100 acquaintances who only like the performance.
And if our platonic friendships are corrupted by our lack of self-worth, the manuscript makes it crystal clear that our romantic relationships are where this psychological damage becomes the most exposed.
Oh, romance is a massive trigger.
The underlying anxiety and the desperate need for external validation create an incredibly toxic cocktail when romance is introduced.
The author tackles a very prevalent, deeply ingrained cultural narrative here. They discuss the profound danger of the Prince Charming myth, or as it's phrased in the text's original cultural context, the search for the other half of the orange.
The idea that you are just a half person wandering the earth incomplete until you finally find the one specific person who completes your soul.
Which sounds very romantic.
It sounds so poetic and romantic when you watch it in a movie, but the author argues that in reality, it is incredibly toxic. Because if you truly believe you are fundamentally incomplete without a partner, you aren't building a relationship based on mutual love and respect.
You are building a relationship based on extreme, desperate dependency.
Yes. Dependency is the breeding ground for severe relationship anxiety. If someone is your missing half, then losing them doesn't just mean a breakup. It means losing a vital part of yourself.
Your very survival feels entirely tied to their constant presence and approval.
And the manuscript details the ugly, rarely discussed reality of what that level of dependence looks like behind closed doors. It leads to incredibly controlling behaviors.
Fear makes people do irrational things.
The author admits to the shame of obsessively checking their partner's phone, spending hours overanalyzing the punctuation of a single text message, experiencing immense irrational jealousy over casual interactions, and utilizing manipulative behavior to ensure the person never leaves.
They were trying to control the uncontrollable.
They were essentially trying to build a cage around the relationship to feel safe.
But a cage never creates actual safety. It only creates suffocation and resentment. The neurochemistry of this dynamic is similar to addiction.
Really, like a drug addiction.
Very similar. The anxious partner needs constant reassurance, a text back, a compliment, to get a hit of dopamine and lower their cortisol levels. When the reassurance isn't immediate, the withdrawal triggers panic.
That sounds like torture for both people.
It is. This raises an important question, though. When you are operating from a place of intense baseline anxiety and deep insecurity, how do you differentiate between actual intuition, a genuine red flag that a partner is behaving badly, and your own anxiety projecting worst-case scenarios onto a perfectly innocent partner?
The author writes about struggling with that exact dilemma constantly. They literally couldn't tell the difference between the thought, my partner's pulling away because they don't love me, and my brain is terrified of abandonment, so it is inventing signs that they are pulling away.
The lines get completely blurred.
And inevitably, because the entire foundation of the relationship was built on the shifting sand of anxiety, it imploded. The author describes the absolute devastation of the breakup. It wasn't just the standard sadness of losing a boyfriend or girlfriend.
It was an existential crisis.
Exactly. Because their entire identity, their sense of being a complete orange, was wrapped up in this other person, the breakup felt like an annihilation of the self.
The psychological shock of a breakup in an enmeshed relationship is profound. The author described the jarring, surreal transition of someone going from being your everything, the person you text the second you wake up, the person who knows all your deepest secrets, your default plan for every weekend, to becoming a complete stranger overnight.
The physical silence in your apartment the morning after is deafening.
You aren't just mourning the person, you are mourning the version of yourself that existed with them.
But that absolute devastation was the catalyst for a major breakthrough in the manuscript. Hitting rock bottom forced a reevaluation. The author realizes that true healthy relationships are not about blending two incomplete souls together until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins.
A healthy relationship is fundamentally a contract based on clear boundaries and mutual autonomy. It is two complete, whole oranges choosing to roll in the same direction for a while.
I love that visual. Two whole oranges.
Yeah. If you have to put on a mask to keep someone interested, or if you constantly have to shrink your personality, hide your anxiety, or agree with everything they say to make them comfortable, they are not actually falling in love with you.
They're falling in love with a reflection.
A convenient mirage you created to appease them.
The author has this beautiful realization about what a partner should actually represent. They write that finding a partner should be about finding a home, not a battlefield.
Yes.
You shouldn't be in a constant state of conflict, hypervigilance, and anxiety, wondering if they're going to leave you today. You should be with someone who pushes you to achieve your wildest dreams, not someone who belittles them.
Support versus suppression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The author actually mentions a past partner who dismissively referred to their creative ambitions as chasing birds in the air, essentially calling them foolish, unrealistic fantasies.
When a partner actively minimizes your ambitions or mocks your passions, they are usually expressing their own deep-seated insecurities. They want to keep you small so you won't outgrow them.
Right. It's about control.
A healthy partner wants you to grow and expand, even if that growth shifts the dynamic, because they trust the foundation of the relationship.
So to fix these broken romantic relationships, to heal the superficial friendships, and to finally conquer the crippling anxiety, the author realizes they have to stop fighting their fundamental nature.
They had to stop going against the grain.
They had to stop looking in the mirror and seeing their core personality traits as fatal flaws that needed to be eradicated. And this brings us to a major turning point in the manuscript, reframing their extreme sensitivity.
The author reveals a core component of their identity. They have always been a highly sensitive person, often referred to in psychology as an HSP.
And for their entire life up to this point, they viewed this heightened sensitivity as a profound, embarrassing weakness.
Which makes perfect sense because society totally reinforces that idea from the time we were children. We are constantly taught to repress our emotions.
Oh, all the time.
We hear phrases like, toughen up, grow a thick skin, stop being so dramatic, or you're too sensitive.
The societal ideal of a successful adult is this stoic, unbothered corporate rock of a person who never cries, never gets rattled by bad news, and processes everything with cold logic.
Our modern cultural definition of strength is deeply flawed and often completely backward. We equate strength with a total absence of emotion. We teach people to build a tough, impenetrable armor to survive the world.
But that doesn't work for an HSP.
Not at all. Individuals with the HSP trait actually have a neurological difference in how their sensory processing works. Their nervous systems filter less information out.
So they just take more in.
They process stimuli, sounds, emotions, subtle shifts in environment much more deeply than the average person.
I want to try a different metaphor here to understand this, because I think the standard holding a beach ball underwater analogy we hear in pop psychology doesn't quite capture the physical reality of being highly sensitive.
Go for it.
Imagine your nervous system is an audio mixing board in a recording studio.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
For most people, the gain is set to a normal level. You hear the music, it's pleasant, you can have a conversation over it. But for a highly sensitive person, the gain on every single microphone is turned all the way up.
Oh, wow.
The music sounds richer, more complex, and more intensely beautiful than anyone else in the room can perceive. But when a siren goes off outside the studio, it doesn't just distract them, it physically shatters the speakers.
That is an excellent way to visualize the neurobiology. It is a dual-edged sword. Yes, having the gain turned up means the bad things hurt significantly more.
A casual, cruel comment from a coworker feels like a physical blow to the chest.
A breakup feels like the literal end of the world. The siren shatters the speaker. But the author experiences a gradual, powerful reveal. The flip side of this trait is that it allows you to feel the good things with cinematic intensity.
Cinematic intensity. I love that phrasing. The author notes that their sensitivity is the exact engine that fuels their creativity. It allows for incredibly deep, empathetic connections with others because they can intuitively read a room.
They notice what others miss.
Right. It grants them the ability to appreciate the tiniest, most mundane details of life that everyone else rushes past. The specific quality of golden hour light in the afternoon, a hidden meaning in a lyric, the subtle, unspoken shift in a friend's mood that signals they need a hug.
They process the entire world in high definition.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of mental health, we see why the author's previous strategy of being a perfect robot failed so spectacularly. You cannot take a nervous system wired for high-definition, cinematic emotion and force it to operate as a stoic, unfeeling machine.
The explosion, the panic attacks, the intrusive thoughts was simply the audio board short-circuiting from the suppressed overload. True resilience is not about amputating your emotions so you don't feel pain.
Right, because if you numb the pain, you numb the joy too. You turn off all the microphones.
Exactly. True resilience is facing a harsh, unpredictable, often cruel world with an open, feeling heart, and learning how to regulate those massive emotions rather than repressing them.
It's about management, not elimination.
It is building the emotional toolkit to say, I feel this incredibly deeply. It is overwhelming right now, but I will survive feeling it.
Embracing that sensitivity, accepting that they were wired differently, was the critical first step for the author. But then comes the practical application.
Yeah.
How do we actually build this elusive concept of self-love that everyone on the internet is constantly preaching about?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because the author gets hilariously and very justifiably frustrated with modern self-care advice.
It is a very relatable frustration. The modern wellness industry has essentially industrialized the concept of self-love, turning it into yet another exhausting checklist of perfectionism.
They also point this out brilliantly. They complain that all the advice online is incredibly demanding. To love yourself, you have to wake up at 5 a.m., take a freezing cold plunge, do an hour of difficult yoga, eat only raw, locally sourced organic food, meditate perfectly without a single stray thought, and as they joke in the text, kidnap a unicorn.
Which is just absurd.
How is that helpful? All these extreme expectations do is take a person who is already cracking under the weight of societal expectations and hand them a brand new, highly complex 10 out of 10 rubric to fail at.
When self-care becomes just another metric you use to judge your own adequacy, it ceases to be care and immediately becomes self-punishment.
It's just more work.
If you rely on external rituals like rigid wellness routines, attending every networking party, receiving compliments, or securing a romantic relationship to fix an internal void, it will never work. The void is internal, so the solution must be internal.
So what actually worked for them? The manuscript outlines a version of self-love that is refreshingly unglamorous, somewhat gritty, and incredibly practical.
It's much more accessible.
It really is. It starts with a mirror. And it doesn't involve standing in front of the mirror shouting toxic positivity affirmations like, I am a flawless, glowing goddess.
You force delusions?
Exactly. It is much more grounded. It's looking in the mirror, looking at the physical things you genuinely do not like. The author specifically mentions not liking their forehead or a fold on their arm admitting, okay, I honestly don't love this part of me.
Just acknowledging the reality.
And then deciding in that very moment that those perceived physical flaws are not going to stop you from living your life, going to the beach, or being seen today.
That is the practice of radical acceptance. It is a deliberate decoupling of your physical appearance from your inherent worth.
Right.
You do not have to delude yourself into thinking you are physically flawless to fundamentally believe you deserve respect, love, and active participation in society.
The other massive life-changing component of their practical self-love was simply mastering the ability to say no.
The power of the negative.
It sounds so small, but it's revolutionary for a people pleaser. It means refusing the extra croquette at a dinner party when you are already full, even if the host insists and you're worried about offending them.
Setting a boundary.
It means skipping the social event you genuinely do not want to attend without offering a massive, fake, agonizing apology. And ultimately, on a macro level, it means choosing the life path that you actually want, rather than the safe, prestigious one your parents or society outlined for you.
True self-love is boundary setting. It is the realization that you are already a complete orange. You do not need external validation, a perfect body, or a partner to make you whole.
I really love the specific anecdote the author shares about gaining what they beautifully call the happy kilos.
That was a wonderful section.
When they were in the darkest depths of their severe anxiety, their stomach was constantly tied in knots. Their nervous system was locked in fight or flight, which shuts down digestion. They lost a ton of weight.
Because the body is preparing to run, not eat.
And the tragic irony is that by strict societal beauty standards, they probably looked great or fit. People might have even complimented their weight loss. But inside, they were mentally and physically dying.
The praise reinforces the sickness.
When they finally beat back the severe anxiety, when they started implementing boundaries, resting, and accepting their sensitive nature, their appetite naturally returned.
As the nervous system exited the chronic fight-or-flight mode, the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, came back online, allowing their body to function normally again.
Yes, and they started eating without the crushing guilt. They gained back the weight they had lost, plus a few extra happy kilos.
The happy kilos.
And they had this profound realization looking back at photos. Being hot on the outside, fitting into a smaller size meant absolutely nothing if they were miserable, terrified, and having panic attacks on the inside. They actively chose a soft, happy, nourished body over a stressed, starved, perfect one.
It represents a complete paradigm shift in their psychology. They transition from valuing how they are perceived externally by others to valuing how they actually feel internally in their own body.
So what happens when you put all of this together? When you finally drop the heavy mask, when you accept the waves of anxiety instead of fighting them, when you embrace your high sensitivity and use that mixing board as a superpower, and when you finally start saying no to the things that drain you.
The manuscript shares the ultimate hard-won payoff of this entire process. The author stops pursuing a conventional, highly stressed career path that was chosen simply to please others, to look good on paper, and to maintain that 10 out of 10 facade.
They pivot entirely.
Instead, they lean heavily into their true, authentic nature. They take that sensitivity, that raw creativity, that high-definition processing we talked about, and they start an audio project right in their bedroom, entirely on their own terms.
And it becomes wildly successful. But the external success isn't the real point of the story.
Yeah.
The point is why it resonated so deeply with people.
Because it was real.
Exactly. They didn't just survive their anxiety, their panic attacks, and their perfectionism. It utilized it. They used their extreme vulnerability, their willingness to talk openly about the ugly, messy, terrifying parts of life to create genuine, real connections with an audience.
They turned their biggest perceived weakness into their greatest asset.
They took off the jingle bell mask and said, "Here is my actual face."
Yeah.
And thousands of people looked at it and said, "Me too."
If we synthesize this entire manuscript, it forces us to critically reevaluate our cultural definition of human potential.
So,
The illusion we are constantly sold is that reaching your potential means becoming an optimized, flawless, efficient machine. A perfect robot that never fails, never needs a break, and never feels overwhelming negative emotions.
yeah.
But this anonymous journey proves the exact opposite.
Our greatest potential isn't found in our perfection.
No, it is not. Our greatest potential is unlocked through our humanity. It is our flaws, our intense sensitivity, our messy, unpredictable emotions, and our terrifying vulnerability that actually allow us to connect with others, to create meaningful art, and to find true satisfaction. The robot is a developmental dead end. The messy, sensitive human is where the magic actually happens.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Right?
It means you can take a deep breath. You let your shoulders drop. You do not have to be a 10 out of 10 today. You don't have to be a 10 tomorrow either. You just have to be you.
You can just exist.
You have to take the blinders off, step off the endless treadmill of obligation, and realize that you are inherently worthy of love, rest, and respect. Precisely because you are a complex human being, not despite it.
The very things you are spending all your energy trying to hide from the world might be the exact things the world needs most from you.
Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over. Think about the one flaw you spend the absolute most energy trying to conceal from everyone around you. The thing you are terrified your friends or your boss will find out about you. What if that exact trait, your profound sensitivity, your weirdness, your overwhelming intensity, is actually the missing key to your greatest strength? What if the X-ray showing all your broken parts is actually a treasure map to your superpower?